Hello students, we have come to the very end of our lectures on modern world architecture, and we conclude with a glimpse of contemporary architecture, the way ahead. What are we seeing today? What can we expect in the days to come? To understand contemporary architecture, an introduction to the key concepts and the global trends that are impacting architecture today. As I speak, massive changes are taking place, changes that are so rapid that by the time you start hearing these lectures online, many more changes would have already happened. Changes in the world of science and technology that would have a direct impact on architecture. Many new tools are coming up meant for designers and architects, and they are constantly evolving at unbelievable speeds. Many tools that were unheard of even a few years back have now become a part of our architectural design, and many more are coming. We simply cannot anticipate with any degree of clarity what the future holds for us, but we will make an attempt here to see where architecture is going. What is contemporary architecture? As I mentioned in my last presentation, modern architecture refers to the architecture of the 20th century, primarily as it began in the early part of the 20th century, evolved further on to movements like late modernism, postmodernism, deconstructivism, and several others, and then onwards into the 21st century, somewhere around the 1990s and 21st century, is called the time of contemporary architecture. It is the architecture of our time. Some people say it is the architecture from 1950s till now, and some people peg it from 1990s till now. There are a lot of overlaps. As you know, architectural movements don't just end at one point, another movement begins. It's not so cut and dried. Movements overlap each other. Contemporary architecture, though, is not a defined style. You can define modernism as a style, or late modernism, postmodernism, deconstructivism, and many more. But contemporary architecture is not a style like Gothic or Art Deco. It is visually very diverse with parametric forms, minimalism, regional expressions, whole gamut of expressions and issues come together. As I take you through these slides, please also take a note of the buildings I have kept on the side, which will add on to your architectural vocabulary, like the Maxim Museum in Rome by Zaha Hadid. We've already seen that before, or the Bosco Verticale in Milan by Stefano Biori in 2014. Contemporary architecture is both plural and dynamic. It's not one look or method. It embraces multiplicity in style and process. It is evolving as society is evolving. Issues of environment and technology are evolving. The kind of major developments taking place in the world of STEM, that is science, technology, engineering and medicine, particularly the first three, is leading to massive alterations, changes and dynamic shifts in architecture. Mirrors how we live and imagine the future. Contemporary architecture reflects current concepts of sustainability, innovation and even inclusion. It includes issues of which are locally sensitive and also global influences. So both things matter. The word that comes to my mind is a word that was coined quite a while back called glocal. It is both global but it's also local. We are not going to give up our global endeavor, but we will not reject our local identity. For example, in this very slide, you see three buildings that seem so different from each other, and that is the plurality of contemporary architecture. We have a primary school in Burkina Faso in Africa by Francis Kere in 2001, which is a part of regional modernism. To be even more critical, I can say critical regionalism. The Heydar Aliyev Center, which is all about fluid parametric structure, and then we have a green building called the Pixel building in Australia by Studio 505. This kind of buildings not only show the plurality of contemporary architecture, something that wasn't so evident in the times past. In the modern times, for example, modernism brought in a very universally similar palette all over the world. There was a sameness about it. That sameness has disappeared completely. Architecture is very widely varied today because local context along with global context work together, and as you see here, Region wise also it's very diverse. We have it in Africa, we have it in Australia, and we have it in Azerbaijan. So 3 different continents, 3 different architects, 3 different building typologies, and 3 different ways of making it. There can be many, many more. Now, when we try to compare modernism versus contemporary, modernism is early 20th century, is for function, rationality, minimalism, no ornament, but also a sense of placelessness. There is a same design applicable everywhere. Contemporary is about free form, it's tech enabled, it's diverse, it's culturally adaptive and designed to match the place it is being built in. So, it is not placeless and rootless, it has definite roots. So, in the 2 buildings that indicate these 2 different ideas, there is the new National Gallery in Berlin, part of modernism, part of also Mies van der Rohe's minimalism, an excellent iconic building, but it clearly shows us this idea. On the other hand, we have the Louvre in Abu Dhabi by Jean Nouvel, which is contemporary, and it tells us about this ideology. The modernist example like the Villa Savoy with architect Le Corbusier, 1929, it is RCC frame construction based on the domino system that Le Corbusier evolved along with Max Dubois. It's based on modernist principles, the 5 points of a new architecture, it's got a free plan, free facade, pilotis, roof garden, ribbon windows, and it is under the international style. Then there is an early contemporary example, and I will clarify this. Contemporary period also has 2 parts to it, the early and the late or the present. The early contemporary example is like the Guggenheim in Bilbao by Frank Gehry, 1997, an example of deconstructivism. The previous one was modernism, international style. This is free form titanium structure, fragmented form with controlled chaos. A tourism icon led to what came to be known as the Bilbao effect. And then the current contemporary example, the Heydar Aliyev Center in 2012 by Zaha Hadid, an example of parametricism with flowing surfaces which are digitally designed, exterior sweeping form, and the interior curves that you see here. Indian example also, but going way back in 1977 to 92, I Am Bangalore by B.V. Doshi, an example of critical regionalism, a truly modern Indian building using local stone, shaded corridors, a cultural response, visuals like courtyards, corridors, and the way the overall plan has been organized, the way the courtyards have been organized, this corridor, a covered plaza leading, covered walkway leading from the main institute to the dormitory section. So, again if we compare modernism versus contemporary, modernism from the 1920s to the 1950s, Farnsworth House is the example. Contemporary, again we can shape it or we can talk about it from the 1950s till now by saying early contemporary 1950s to 90s and current contemporary from 1990s till today. This is based upon my own nomenclature that I have slowly evolved as I have studied these buildings. How can I categorize them? Because I came to this point where I saw 2 different points of talking about contemporary from 1950s till today, another aspect looking at 1990s till today. Then I reflected on that and I said, can we not just split it into 2 by saying 50s to 90s we talked about early contemporary and 90s to today we can talk about current contemporary. So the Edge in Amsterdam by PLP Architecture, probably the greenest building in the world or the smartest building in the world today was done in 2014 and we've looked at it. Now, when we look at modernism versus contemporary architecture, let us look at some of the aspects and how they correlate with each other. Attitude. In modernism, there was a fixed rule. There is one right way. In contemporary, there is flexibility. It's open to change and open to challenge. Form. Straight lines, boxes, simple shapes. Contemporary, it's curves, folds and creative forms. The approach and visual style, the same design everywhere, most buildings look similar, but here there are different designs for different places, buildings look very different one from the other. The tools was hand drawing in simple geometry. The tools here are digital, parametric, artificial intelligence. The style was one style, it was clean and repetitive. Here there are many styles and mixed ideas. The examples are like Villa Savoy and Bauhaus. The example here is parallel to Villa Savoy. There is the Wall-less House by Shigeru Ban. Then there is the Heydar Aliyev Center, the Maxi Museum, etc. Another thing that we find is the way technology evolved led to the evolution of the built form. The reason why there were straight lines and boxes, etc., was because the kind of tools we had to be able to imagine the kind of forms, the fluid form that we see today was simply not available. Our CAD limitations were there. So even if imaginations were possible, to convert that imagination into a drawing which was buildable was difficult, and then to actually put that on site was even more difficult. The relationship between CAD, computer aided design, and CAM, computer aided manufacturing, was weak. Something that started getting overcome with projects like the Guggenheim Bilbao, where I have talked about this very aspect, how fluidly the information from CAD was passed on to CAM for manufacturing. Now when we look at movements, then 1920s to 1950s is about modernism, it's about functionalism, minimalism, and most of all, form follows function. 1960s to 80s, late modernism, abstract geometry with advanced structure. This is a radical progression of modernism with Richard Meyer Smith House. The projects that I have listed here, most of these projects we have actually covered in our previous presentations. We have seen the Smith House, we have seen the glass pyramid by I.M. Pye. 1960s to 90s is also postmodernism, which was an anti-reaction against modernism. It's about historical recall, ornamentation, double coding, which means the building speaks two languages, one to the specialist and one to the common onlooker. We have looked at Michael Graves' Portland building, we have studied Charles Moore's Piazza d'Italia. 1970s onwards till today, high-tech architecture, which began as high-tech in style and then became high-tech in substance. We have seen that entire progression in our series on high-tech architecture with exposed surfaces, inside out, structure as aesthetic, Richard Rogers, Lloyds of London, Foster's HSBC, and many more. 1980s to 2000s, we looked at deconstructivism with fragmentation, non-linear forms, controlled chaos, dynamic geometry with works of Gehry in the Guggenheim, Eisenman's Wexner Center with that hanging column in the air, Libeskin's Jewish Holocaust Museum or Jewish Museum in Berlin. Critical regionalism from the 80s till today using local materials, climate response, contextual sensitivity with works of Doshi like Sangat, Zumthor's Therme Walls and Glenn Murcutt's Magne House in Australia. 1990s to today is contemporary. So here in this part I am not focusing on early contemporary and current contemporary, I am just focusing on contemporary as pluralistic, digital design, environmental and social consciousness with works of Zaha Hadid, works of PLP, the works of Bury in the Bosco Verticale. These three buildings also we have looked at in the previous presentations. Now when we look at postmodern, late modern, contemporary, we need to understand the distinction. Just to recapitulate it with you, in late modernism we had seen the intensified principles of modernism. They were sleek, expressive, even high-tech. Focus on structure, geometry and light that we saw with regard to the Athenaeum. Engineering driven teamwork. The whole building comes up as a result of series of teams working together and then clubbing the entire thing together with several assemblies being put together into one building. HSBC building by Norman Foster or even the Lloyds of London here by Richard Rogers. Postmodernism was a reaction against the rigid, uniform, impersonal character of modernism. Therefore, postmodernism was playful, was symbolic, had historical recall with buildings like the Portland building by Michael Graves. There was use of ornament and color like in this building. There was also double coding. There was public symbolism and irony. There was even a symbolic notch, for example, in the AT&T building designed by Philip Johnson. Contemporary architecture, on the other hand, takes us even further. It's an umbrella term that includes both late and postmodernism, but also includes deconstructivism, sustainable or green design, critical regionalism, parametricism, digital architecture, all of it fall within the purview of contemporary architecture, with buildings like the Morpheus Hotel in Macau by Zaha Hadid or the Apple Center in the US by Norman Foster. Moving on, let us look at these movements through the lens of houses. We've seen the Farnsworth House, modernist minimalism. Smith House, decomposed, late modernism. Vana Venturi, the houseness idea of a house, back again with the Vana Venturi house, postmodernism. Or the Maison Bourdieu in France by Rem Koolhaas, specifically designed for a person who was physically challenged. So here we find in contemporary architecture, architecture is responding to an inclusive design concept. If we want to do a visual comparison, then we have the Humana building by Michael Graves, postmodern 1985. We have the HSBC Hong Kong by Norman Foster, late modernism 1986. And we have the Oasis Hotel in Singapore by Hua Architects in 2016. And you can see how dramatically the buildings shift visually. The key features of contemporary architecture, there is one thing, it's global. It's not limited only to Western architecture, and I'll talk about it. Second is it's very plural and diverse. It's postmodern, it's parametric, it's critically regional, all of it in different buildings. It is contextual also. So though it is diverse, but it responds to a context. It responds to climate, to culture, to materials. It is integrated technologically. Rather, technology is integrated into the building with digital tools and smart systems and IoT devices. So again, we have three buildings here. There is the Jules Changi Airport in Singapore by Moshe Safdie, and this is about digital form. Then we have the Pulitzer Hall in the US by Tadao Ando 2005, and this is about minimalism in concrete. Then we have the Galaxy Soho in China by Zaha Hadid in 2012. This is fluid part of parametric architecture. Now when we talk of pluralism, or that is diversity in forms and ideas, includes minimalism, parametricism, biomorphism, and regional modernism or critical regionalism. Let us take the example of the Parish Art Museum in the US by Herzog and Dumoulin, which is minimalistic. It's a long barn-like structure combining minimalism with a rural context. I'll show you these pictures because I could not accommodate them on this slide with this big table, but I'll show you the pictures. There is Harbin Opera House in China by Mad Architects, parametricism, organic form through parametric digital tools inspired by the local snowy landscape. Then the Eden project that we saw in the previous presentation of Nicholas Grimshaw, which is biomorphism. It's a geodesic dome shaped like soap bubbles, and biomimetic, mimicked from biology structure. Then the Beth Ur Rof Mosque in Dhaka by Mariana Tabassum, regional modernism or critical regionalism, brick construction with natural light, thermal comfort and calmness. These are those buildings. Now here you see one interesting thing. Without the pictures, it's not the same thing at all. Just text is never going to be enough in architecture. You see the pictures and the idea becomes clear. The barn-like rural building, minimal architecture of Herzog and Dumoulin. The Harbin Opera House in China, fluid form, parametric design by Mad Architects. The Beth Ur Rof Mosque in Dhaka is talking about critical regionalism, exposed brickwork, very calm and soothing spaces within the mosque. Or the Eden project, biomimectic, these soap-like bubbles that have been created. This is all about diversity, about pluralism. Then we come to contextual sensitivity. When we look at, for example, the Friendship Center in Bangladesh by Kashif Chaudhary, it uses local brick, water courtyard, minimal carbon footprint. When we look at the Yinchuan Museum of Contemporary Art in China, the form repeats the desert dunes. It uses regional tones and passive strategies. When we look at the Palmyra House in Maharashtra by Bijoy Jain, it blends traditional materials and techniques with modern design. It's sensitive to local environment and culture. This is contextual sensitivity, responsive to climate, to culture, to landscape, to local materials and technologies, aligning with critical regionalism but using contemporary tools and technologies, contemporary tools and aesthetics, contemporary tools and the contemporary concepts we have in context to a particular place. Come to technological integration, that is the use of digital tools, building information modeling, AI and sustainability technologies like the Media TIC building in Barcelona by Enric Rui Gelli, which is a climate responsive facade, ETF cushion facade for climate control, responsive skin which adjusts transparency, lightweight steel mesh structure. Then Taipei Performing Arts Center in Taipei, which is a digital design and modular system. It's got a modular theatre formats, it's got truss supported sphere that you see here supported by this structural system, digitally optimized circulation and visibility. Then we have the Tesla Gigafactory in the US, which is based on industrial AI and renewable integration. It has got the largest footprint by a building in the world. It's AI optimized, optimized logistics. It's got integrated solar and battery systems within it. So buildings that are technologically much more forward looking, technologies ingrained into them. The global nature of contemporary architecture, it is so this is one very important thing that is happening in contemporary architecture. Earlier in the modern times of the 20th century, talk about architecture, you were talking about certain continents. Major architecture was coming out of Europe, out of America, out of Japan. There was no much talk about the Middle East or China or India, though there was architectural progress happening there. But much of the important work was in these parts. Definitely not Africa, very little was heard of Latin America. But today it is not just about Europe and America, it's a global phenomenon shaped by diverse local contexts, technologies and values. There are cross-cultural flows, hybrid identities and shared global concerns, for example climate change. Pluralism and diversity is there in aesthetics, in practice and in ideology. Voices, architectural voices are being heard from Africa, from Asia, from South Asia, from Latin America that are shaping design. For example, the Franco-German embassy, this interesting building by Marina Tabassum in Dhaka, or the Leo Doctors Housing in Africa, Burkina Faso by Francis Kere, or a set series of buildings just to show you that the global south is in no way behind what is happening in the first world countries. For example, the Liberation War Museum in Bangladesh, again by Marina Tabassum, the Center for Health and Social Welfare, again Burkina Faso by Francis Kere, the National Museum of African American History that I discussed in my earlier presentation by David Adjaye, who is an African architect but built this project in Washington DC. Then there is the Freedom Park Museum in South Africa, the Niamey Cultural Center in the Niger in South Africa. Global case studies by region. We can look at Asia. We saw the Kanchenjunga apartments. Well, I had seen this in my series on modern Indian architecture. This is climate responsive project and it is built on the concept of the bungalow with the interior living spaces surrounded by different other spaces and verandas all around that protect the inner spaces from direct heat and direct hot breeze also. Africa, the Women's Center in Rufisque in Senegal by Mariam Kamara in 2014 using compressed earth bricks is sustainable. West African building tradition being used in a modern language. In Latin America, the Quinta Monroy housing in Chile by Alejandro Aravena is a low income housing that is incremental. So, when we had mentioned about the Belapur housing, or when we talk about the Aranya housing in India, that are both incremental housing projects, projects which have got incremental growth in them, this is very similar but in Latin America. In the US, with the Broad Museum in Los Angeles, Diller, Scofidio and Renfro show us a high-tech form with porous white fiberglass reinforced concrete panels. Come to technology and innovation. We are talking today about parametric design using software, for example, Rhino and Grasshopper. We are talking about building information modeling for planning, simulation and collaboration. We are talking about robotic fabrication and 3D printing in complex structures. We are talking about, and these we find in the shed in the New York City in Galaxy Soho. We had talked about the earlier years when we talked in detail about the design and construction of the Guggenheim in Bilbao, how CATIA was brought in, how software tools were developed, how the first understanding of BIM was there in that project. Talk of sustainability and green design. We're talking of passive design, which involves orientation, natural ventilation and daylight. We talk of active systems, that is solar panels and smart facades, and the use of LEED and BREEAM standards of certification for green building design. We use local materials and we go in for carbon footprint reduction. For example, in this green school in Indonesia by Ibuku in 2021, or the California Academy of Sciences, a green building designed by Renzo Piano in California in 2008. Typology, divergent typologies that are all moving forward, and remarkable amazing buildings are coming up in housing, in public buildings, in skyscrapers and many more. I am just touching on a few like housing, the Holmes Road Studios in London, skyscrapers like the Shanghai Tower in China by Gensler, public buildings like the Oslo Opera House in Norway. So what are the critical themes in contemporary architecture? If we were to sum up what we have just heard and put them in these central themes, the critical themes are climate change and green building. For that we have, for example, the Bullet Center. We have seen this in our previous presentation, and this is by Miller Hull Partnership in 2013. It's a green commercial building, net zero energy and with rainwater harvesting. With use of smart technologies and urban response, we have the El Bahar Tower in Abu Dhabi by Aedus Architects in 2012. It's got a responsive, kinetic Mashrabia facade which opens and closes based on sun orientation. Then there is about social inclusion and identity, the Ispana Library Park in Colombia by G. Mazzanti in 2007. It's about education, culture and dignity to the undeserved communities, or I'm sorry, the underserved communities. Then design for different abilities, genders and communities. Center for the Blind and the Partially Sighted in France. Here there is tactile navigation. There are auditory cues for those who are audibly who challenged in their hearing, easy independence movement for people with locomotor disabilities and braille signage for those who can't see. So here we find these designs which are meant for people with different abilities. Then the issue of new materials and techniques like glass, recycled composites and smart facades, the use of glass in Apple Store, ultra clear laminated structural glass. This is a software driven design like parametricism. And then when we can also relate contemporary architecture today to being equal to being socially aware, a very important aspect of contemporary architecture globally. Designed for people with different abilities, designed for different genders and designed for different communities. Public space participatory design like the National Kaohsiung Center for Arts in Taiwan by Meccano, it inclusive public cultural space with access in circulation and use, the incremental social housing in Ahmedabad by C Lab in 2022. It is incremental growth, it is women-led occupancy and sanitation first design. So, in conclusion, what have we learned in our journey from the 20th to the 21st century, modernism to contemporary? Actually, I should be really talking about our journey from the 18th century all the way till today. I should like to mention to you about neoclassicism, where we talked about the foundation of modern architecture with the age of the intellectual revolution. Then we moved on to the industrial revolution and talked about the rapid and dramatic changes that took place in society and how architectural faced a problem of the right form of our buildings. How Art Nouveau was the first such major initiative to break away from historicism and to look at natural forms for inspiration. And then came in modernism, and along the way Frank Lloyd Wright had already begun his work on organic architecture and design of free-flowing interiors, which then moved on to the mainland Europe, and major changes took place, revolutionary ideas all centered around, if I could put it very simply, form follows function. Dramatic changes took place, spread over globally, but then other changes came in which I am talking about here today, like late modernism, postmodernism, critical regionalism, deconstructivism, metabolism, futurism and many more. To conclude, what have we learned? What have we learned in our entire journey from Bauhaus to Centre Pompidou to Guggenheim Bilbao to the Heydar Aliyev Center? Architecture has evolved from form follows function to expressive, symbolic, human-centered forms. It shifted from universal modernism to regional identities like aspects of critical regionalism and neo-modernism. Technology and culture have become equally powerful as drivers of alongside form. So, form is important, but technology and culture are very dominant drivers of building design. Sustainability, adaptability, inclusivity are essential themes for the future. In conclusion, our architecture of the 21st century is looking towards sustainability and climate action, net zero buildings, circular construction, green buildings, looking towards technology integration with AI, robotics, smart homes, digital twins, Internet of Things, looking towards human-centered design with neuroarchitecture, inclusivity and well-being at its center. We are looking at cultural identity, looking at local materials, vernacular revival and a global local balance in our building. In conclusion, contemporary architecture we can say thus is evolving, it is global, it is plural. It is built with tech, but it is rooted in people and place. These two buildings here are reflective of these tremendous changes that are taking place in architecture. In conclusion, technology is preparing us to study and understand 21st century challenges. Contemporary buildings are being built across continents with such diversity, such contextual identity that we have never seen before. Two buildings here are the Ningbo Museum in China or the Newlang Art Center in Sri Lanka. This journey will continue. It will not end here. There is a lot more to learn, lot more for you to gather as the years progress. I just hope that these 60 modules have in some way given you a glimpse of the modern world architecture. I can say it with complete honesty that this entire presentation is far too limited to understand the entire scope of modern architecture or even contemporary architecture. But I hope it has set a spark in you to want to know more about this. It has created an interest in you, a lively interest that you will go to the books, that you will go to the articles in the research papers, that you will go on the internet and desire to learn more about these architects and their amazing works. That you will want to bring in these ideas into your own design studio and learn from them. As I conclude, I want to thank the e-learning center of IIT Roorkee for their amazing contribution to enable us and give us these facilities to do this job as we have been able to do today. An entire team of people along with Mr. Sarath, etc., who are all helping us to put this together for you. I have a wonderful team with me. My research team includes Shreya Rai, Farhan Asim, along with Polomi, who have helped in putting these slides and this entire data together, and they are even now on the job to be able to run this course for you. I thank you so much for being a part of this series. I know there are many places I could have done better, shown you much more interesting data. I may have slipped here and there. I beg your forgiveness for that. I just hope that you've had an enriching experience through these presentations, and I wish you all the very best for this course and for your life to come. Thank you.